Let's talk about supercharging. So I'm at a V2 supercharger right now, more on that soon, but generally when you're on the screen, if you kind of zoom out, you'll know if there's superchargers in your area. A supercharger is a very, very fast charging station that Tesla has set up, and they all have a variety of differences and some similarities. So on the screen, anytime you see something red, like this little red circle with a white lightning bolt, that's a supercharger, and you get some information on there. Generally this navigates to the supercharging station. You'll generally get information on how many stalls are available or out of service. This is a great way to just see what's in your area. Tacna, Arizona is a V3 supercharger. So Tesla has 3 versions of supercharging. There's a V1, which they've created, a V2 and a V3, V3 being the latest, and has very, very fast charging. Only the long range versions of the cars can really get that 250 kilowatt speed. I have a standard range plus, so mine caps out at about 175, which is plenty. But something just to note with supercharging is when you're doing a road trip, Tesla will recommend which chargers to go to and how long you need to stay at each one during your trip. Other things to kind of note is that the ones that are not in bold, I guess you could say, but look a little bit, you know, they don't look as lit up. Generally, you'd think those maybe are ones that are full, but that's not the case. These are superchargers that are pretty much out of range at the moment for you to drive to with your current state of charge. So that's something else to keep in mind. Other things to note with etiquette that you'll see is that when you're out with supercharging, I'll give you an example. This supercharger, if you can hear me, says 2B, and the supercharger next to it says 1B, and not all superchargers say that. These superchargers, the way to use them is that you basically take them off and you put them into the car. There's a button here you press that opens it just like your home charger, and it starts to work. But the thing to note is that this is a V2 supercharger, 150 kilowatt max. And what that basically means is when you see 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, or if you go to a supercharging station, you see Teslas that are pretty much staggered. So if I had other cars here, you'd see a Tesla there and then a Tesla where I am with the middle open, or with the superchargers over there, if you can see, they would be staggered. And the reason for that is 1A and 1B are sharing that 150 kilowatt max. And so generally, if you're coming to a supercharger station and you see a Tesla charging, if it's not a V3, basically anything that's under 250 kilowatt max is considered a V2 or lower charging station. Those two stations, so 1A, 1B, are sharing that 150. So at max, when you're both plugged in, you're going to be getting about half. It can fluctuate, so depending on the state of charge of the other car charging next to you, you can get more, but you're sharing that output. So some superchargers you'll see, especially if we look around the Phoenix area, and typically at like malls and other places, the speed is less. So this is like you'd almost consider like a V1 is a 72 kilowatt max. And they also have stalls that are staggered, or sorry, not stalls that are staggered, but people will park in a staggered fashion so that they can get the max 72 if their car can support that charge or is at a state of charge that can support that charging. But that's just general etiquette. If you see a car, unless it's a V3, you want to park staggered, and of course everyone will just start to fill in the spaces as it gets more crowded. This one has 15 of 16 taken up. Chances are that's totally full since one is out of order. So the kilowatt hour rate, so if you have a credit card on file, it'll just charge the card that you have on file normally. If you've been referred or have supercharger miles, you don't have to worry about it. And the nice part about this free supercharging miles is they are really based on the miles you're getting out of it. So even if you're charging beyond 80-90%, it's not worrying about how much power you're drawing. It's going to take as much power as it needs to give you those miles. So it's really one-to-one And honestly, Tesla, I think, is really generous with the miles, even though I feel like I've used a lot more miles than they've actually deducted. So that's supercharging. It's plug and play. If you don't have any free supercharging miles, again, it charges the card on file. The general kilowatt per hour rate that's pretty high for Phoenix area. In California, that's very reasonable and is still less than gas. Just generally, it's less than gas. But in Phoenix, gas is about, as of early September, like low $2 per gallon. So savings isn't too much, better to charge at home. But generally, supercharging is very easy. Just things to keep in mind is parked in a staggered fashion. There's another V2 station with 150, and then it'll split that charge between A and B. V3 is their latest supercharger, and those ones are great because the charging speed is really, really high, and they are independent. So you can get all 250 if you have a long range to yourself, even if every stall is taken. V3 supports full charge, full power without needing to share with the person next to you, and gives you much more accurate charging times. Generally, you see V2s and V1s in like 5-minute increments. V3 can get it down to the minute itself. And then over time, regardless of V1, V2, or anything, as your car starts to get more full, the kilowatt max starts to drop. When I started charging at this station, this was at like 125, and then as the battery gets more and more full, it starts to slow down. So generally, even though you see V3 arguably says like 1,000 miles charging per hour, your battery has to be pretty close to empty to even get that speed. You'd think, oh, okay, why doesn't the battery just charge a full, I should be able to get 300 miles, very, very quickly. If it's 1,000 miles an hour, I should be able to fill up the whole car in 20 minutes. Well, the reality is, the best analogy is that it's like filling a glass of water or a water bottle, or shoot, let's just take this cup. If I had a faucet, this is kind of gross, but if I had a faucet and I filled this thing on full blast, I could fill the cup very high, but at some point when the cup starts to get more full, water will start to spray out of the top, and without the cup being full, and that's dangerous. So with electricity, the general idea is that when the cells are empty or not having their charge, you can throw a bunch of power at it, but you can only do that for so long. As the batteries start to get more full, you can't throw that kind of power at the cells, and you have to reduce the power flow. So as the battery gets more and more full, the state of charge has to reduce dramatically. So this is 25 minutes, right? And this is only going to about 90%. If I were to set this limit all the way to max, now suddenly that 25 minutes just jumped to 45. That last 10% is almost doubling the remaining time left. So it's better not to charge to 100% all the time, and it's just not worth it. It takes too long, and that's something that hopefully with much larger battery packs, as you're driving and taking road trips, it's better to keep the car and driving between 20 and 80%, because you're also able to charge faster. It's not great to go all the way to 100%, or honestly, if you can keep it between like 10% and 60%, that's amazing, because your charging time is going to be very, very fast, because you can throw a lot of power at the cells and recharge it quickly. So that's supercharging for you. I hope it was helpful, and enjoy, and welcome to Tesla if it's your first car, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.